And they'll be talking about how their application benefits the end user, how it saves them more time, how it's really cool, all kinds of different things. But they generally don't touch on how that carrier is going to make more money, or how that OEM is going to sell more phones, or how that application is going to take advantage of differentiable features that the silicon vendor has. So they end up in their pitch to these different groups really missing out on the business opportunity, really not connecting. So the purpose of my presentation today is all around business. It's all around what are the business models that are present in this world. This is very different from, the phone world is very different from the PC world or the PDA world. And that's something to realize. And we're going to go in and talk about the business models. We're going to talk about the value map. I call it a value map because it's nonlinear. You'll see that. There's opportunities for you to sell your applications prior to a phone being sold at the T-Mobile store or the AT&T wireless store. And then there's opportunities for you to sell your application after that phone is out there on the market and the end user requests the application or initiates a purchase. And we'll talk about that. We'll go into detail on all these different players. And there's quite a few of them. This is a pretty complicated ecosystem here. So we're going to spend some time on it. The next thing is once we have an understanding of the market, it's very important to understand how you're going to change your products to appeal to these different people. And I'm just going to go through a few things. One of the things I want to discuss is security, because that's something that always gets us, either development or actual deployment of applications. We'll talk about differentiating features, what the OEMs, what the carriers and the silicon vendors are looking for. And then I've got some, my conclusion, of course, and then some resources for you to be able to check on the web, get an idea of what's out there and more information. So I like to always do things with, good news, bad news. The good news is a quarter of the people in the world have a cell phone right now, which is great. 500 million new phones a year. That's due to replacement, as well as India and China are really coming on strong and increasing the number of cell phone subscribers. The bad news, as you may have experienced already, is how do you sell your application into this ecosystem? The technologies that are there, how do you make your choices? What channels? None of that is defined. And that's really tough to deal with. The good news is if you figure it out before your competitors, it's a great business opportunity. So anytime there's bad news like that, it's actually not a problem, it's an opportunity. And one of the things that is kind of the key is once you understand the value map, the ecosystem, all these people that go into creating this cell phone solution, knowing who the customer is that you're targeting, what they want, and in the time frame of the product life cycle, that phone's product life cycle, when they want it, that will be the key to your business success. So I'm going to talk generally about 3 business models, 3 different ways that you get paid for your applications. One of the most common ones is a fixed fee. If you're dealing with an OEM, you're dealing with a network operator, dealing with a silicon vendor, they may say to you, hey, we want your application, we want to be able to put on any number of phones, and we want to pay you $100,000. That's one of the simplest ways to do it. Another thing is they may say to you, we really like your application, we want to provision on our phones, and we'll pay you $1 per phone. That's generally what independent software vendors like to go for or initially suggest to either OEMs or the network operators. But it's actually frowned upon by those folks. The reason being is the audits can be a pain, and for you it can also be a pain too, because you will have to audit your customer, and that can sometimes be uncomfortable. So royalties, even though they're the most common thing that independent software vendors ask for in their business models, are sometimes quite frowned upon. And another thing is NRE, non-recurring engineering work. This actually happens a lot in the industry, where you will have an application, and what will happen is the OEM or whoever the customer is, they will want to change that application. They will pay you to do it. And they will also pay, of course, for the rights to it. So as I said, there's really two different ways to get on the phone. The first is prior to the phone sale. This is when the phone is being developed. This is prior to it showing up at the AT&T wireless store. And there's a few different players here that are very, very important for you, and you have to pick and choose which ones you want to target. The silicon vendor can get you on. The ODM can get you on, and we'll discuss them in more detail. These are the original design manufacturers, most of them based in Asia. The original equipment manufacturer, this is the person who brands the phone. An example of that is Motorola. And then there's your network operator. So those are your four entities that if you want to get your application onto a phone so that it's shipping on the phone, you need to work with one of those players. Now there's the post-phone sale. This is once it's in the store. The key players are of course, the network operator. And the network operator back end is, in many cases, powered by Mobile to Market, which is a really good program to get your applications out there. Also, the OEMs have their own programs. One of the things we'll also discuss, if you're doing enterprise software, which I know many of you are, the global system integrators who are working with a particular enterprise, that can be a really, really good proof of concept as well as potential sales for you. And then retail. Retail is a new thing that we'll discuss. One of the takeaways of this, though, is the advantage to getting an application on pre-phone sales, you've got guaranteed revenue. Whereas post-phone sale, you're generally selling, if you're doing the Mobile to Market or Handango, it's a bit more of a gamble. The caveat to that, then it's a gamble meaning that customers may buy it, a lot of end users may buy it, or maybe not. The caveat to that, though, is it takes a lot more work to get in on pre-phone sale. It takes a lot more marketing work, and it may take a lot more product development work to meet the requirements of your customer. So I talked about the cell phone value map and how this is kind of a nonlinear process here as far as how a cell phone gets built, as well as how applications then get provisioned on it after it's built. So there's the four key players there. What's common to the three different models is there's a silicon vendor way at the bottom who's providing the chips, the modem, a board support package to start off with. At the top, there's always the network operator. They're the one that ultimately touches the customer on a daily basis. They're the ones who are billing the customer, and they're always involved. And then in between, there's either one of these two entities or both. The original design manufacturer, who will then sell his wares to the OEM, who will then sell his wares to the network operator, or that original design manufacturer may sell his wares directly to the network operator. So this is a simplified explanation of how this works, but I think for most cases it's very accurate. Now, so these are the guys who build the phones. These are the ones that you would target if you wanted to be on that phone pre-silicon, or I'm sorry, pre-platform. Now let's talk, once that phone is created, it's at the T-Mobile store, and you want to get your application on it. Who do you deal with? Of course, the mobile network operator. They're the linchpin of this whole ecosystem. They're everywhere. Also, there's the internet provisioning that you can get. Again, mobile network operator will use that. It could be mobile to market, could be the OEM sites, could be third-party sites like Handango. In either case, it's provisioned one of two ways, either over the air, which is generally through the network operator's website, or through the PC, through ActiveSync, and then it could be from anywhere. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that that application can get on the phone. And what that means for you is that there's multiple players, multiple channels for you to take advantage of. Now is the two special cases. I mentioned the global system integrators working with an enterprise, let's say Boeing. That is one example. Another example is retail. And we'll discuss retail in more detail because there's a lot of people who think that that's really going to take off, that it's going to be like people buying PS2 cartridges over at Electronics Boutique, and there's other people who don't think it's going to take off as high. But it's something that you should consider depending on your application. So you put this all together, and you have a pretty robust value map or ecosystem that you have to understand when you're going to sell your application into this. Picking and choosing who you target, and picking and choosing the business model that you use to appeal to these different folks. So I'm going to go into some detail now on the different players. And the first player that I'm going to talk about is silicon vendor, and I know a lot about that because I am one. And what we do is we create chips, we create reference design cell phones that are then used by OEMs and ODMs. We also create board support packages. So the basic driver guts of a Pocket PC, Phone Edition, or smartphone are created by the silicon vendor, and then the OEM and the ODM use that. We also have our own developer network. The developers in the developer network generally are folks that we've chosen because they do an application, they do something that highlights some area of hardware differentiation we have. Could be some kind of multimedia acceleration, could be security, could be using wireless LAN and Bluetooth and the coexistence that we have within OMAP for that, all kinds of different things. But they're things that help us differentiate our platform. And what I do is I purchase applications outright for inclusion in the board support packages that I then sell to OEMs and ODMs. I also provide NRE for development of new applications that don't exist yet, but that would really help me sell more silicon. Now, we talked about these ODMs. These ODMs are a really interesting new addition to this value chain. This is a really new thing in phones. ODMs have been around for a long time in the PC world as well as in the PDA world. But in the phone world, they're very new. What they do is they design and manufacture phones that the OEM brands or for example, the Orange SPV, the operator brands. They are generally based off the silicon vendor's reference design board and board support package software. So if you do have some of your applications in the silicon vendor stuff, it most likely will end up in the original design manufacturer stuff. But they do customize that for each particular platform. Everybody customizes along the way in this chain. So one of the things on the wants is that the original design manufacturer is going to demand generally what their customer wants. They're generally not going to make the decision by themselves. They are going to be giving basically a purchase order from the OEM or the carrier who's purchasing the device from them saying, I want this particular type of application, and they'll have to go out and get it. And when they purchase that, it could be a one-time fee or it could be royalties. Like I said before, royalties are generally rare. People prefer one-time fees. Now the OEMs, they're the ones who brand the phones, folks like Motorola, and they create their operating system build for each phone model. It can be based off the silicon vendors or the ODM's board support package and software. Could even be their own if they're not using that as a starting point, but nowadays most of them do use the silicon vendors' wares as a starting point and ODM wares sometimes. They generally have their own developer networks too, which can be really good for you to learn about, and I do have some URLs at the end of this presentation on that. And what they want is when an OEM is selling a device to a carrier, there's two things that really pop out. One is they want to be able to tell the carrier, hey, if you buy my phone, you will get more activity on your network. You will make more money because you are billing for more bits of data going back and forth on your network. The other thing is exclusivity. An OEM is going to want from you to be able to say, hey, I want you to sell your application to me and only to me because I want my phone to be special. So that's something to be prepared for there. Now, with the OEMs, they purchase the applications for inclusion in the phones. One of the other things, though, is that a lot of them have very strong engineering teams who will produce their own applications if the independent software vendors don't offer it. So the network operators, like I said before, these are the linchpins. These are the folks that you deal with pre-sale for developing phone as well as post-sale. They're the one entity that's really involved in both very, very heavily. They own and touch the customer. They own the billing of that customer. They sell the phone and the services. They have their own developer networks. You can purchase applications through their own websites. One of the things that they care about really, really much is ARPU. If you haven't heard this term, memorize it, please. It's average revenue per user. That's the one thing they really, really care about. And when you're giving a pitch to an operator about your application, the operator wants to understand, how am I going to make more money off my network due to that application being there? So that's something that's very, very important. So what that means is how much airtime does it use? Is it a subscription? So that basically if it's a subscription type product or service that you offer, it becomes an annuity for the carrier. And then application sales, of course, through their own web front end and mobile to market, things like that. So that's the network operator. Now we'll talk about something a little different. This is one that's off the beaten path. There's not a ton of these that go on, but if you're in enterprise applications, this can be very important and very lucrative for you to get involved in. There's folks like Accenture who work with major companies like General Motors and Boeing, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to do things that really haven't been done before. You know, they're trying to do voice over IP phone calling on a smartphone within a corporate campus. Oh, there's no commercial product out there today that does that, at least not really well. So what this global system integrator has to do is they have to create linkages between the silicon vendor who provides the core technology and the original equipment manufacturer and the network operator, and they have to work with independent software vendors to help create this stuff. And it's a very high service component, a lot of money going into what is ultimately a proof point. Now, the reason why the Boeings or the GMs do these things is because they think that, hey, this is really going to be a differentiable, competitive benefit to my company versus other companies. But the Accentures look at it and they go, yes, you know, we can do this with the Boeing or the GM, but we want to be able to take the same solution, change it a little bit in the future, and sell it to other people. So there's kind of this yin and yang thing that goes on there. The business models that you'll deal with in this really range all over the map. Could be non-recurring engineering expense, could be purchases, all kinds of things. Now this is, to me, one of the more interesting ones. I'm a big gamer, and you know, PlayStation 2 and everything, and Xbox also. I got everything. And there's this new channel that a lot of people think is going to be really, really cool, especially as the capacity of flash cards go up. And that is retail. So that is buying applications, even buying content like movies, in the traditional shrink wrap publisher model. Now, this sounds really cool at first, but if you're if you're into it and you're going to sell Quicken, retail might be a great channel for you because it's already known. And if Fry stocks it, they know that that's going to pull people in. But if you've got an application that nobody's ever heard of or something that's really new that nobody's ever heard of, Fry's probably isn't going to give you shelf space for it. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you read some of the hoo-ha about the retail market opening up and being able to do these things, is that it's generally for known titles. It follows very much the publisher model. So we talked in detail about the players. We talked about the value map and how all these players fit together. I want to talk a little bit about the things that you can do in your products to make them more valuable to these different players. And the first thing I want to talk about is security, because security over the past couple of years has been a tough thing as far as when it comes to development and getting your device unlocked so you can just get your code on there and do your development. It's also becoming more and more of an issue. To step back a little bit, the network operators lose a lot of money from people stealing phones, cloning them, breaking the SIM locks, all kinds of stuff. So these devices are getting more and more and more secure. And when you start using them in enterprise, if you think how many times you lose your phone, how many times have you lost your cell phone, left it somewhere, forgot about it, maybe found it a couple days later, versus how many times you've lost your PC. I mean, there's a lot more phones lost because they're smaller. And that really worries corporations, because if I lose my phone and I have my whole phone list for everybody within TI, and I have my schedule and I have my email on there and somebody picks that up, that could be a problem. So my caveat here is just to make sure that you understand for your particular device that you're targeting, and that's one of my next points, is very important that you target particular devices. But for the next devices, or the devices that you target, make sure you understand what the silicon vendor's hardware security scheme is, what the OEM does, because each OEM may do things differently, and the operator. And ultimately, it's the operator who will determine, once that phone is provisioned and put out into the field, how strict that security is going to be. So I mentioned my next point before. It's very important to target your device. It's key that this is very different from a PC or PDA. This is a phone. Now these phones are growing into what PDAs are, or I'm sorry, not what PCs are, and actually what discrete digital consumer devices are. So if you look today, every new phone sold has a camera on it. And now they're starting to do video, play MP3s, personal video recorders. Very soon you'll be able to tape friends on your phone, take it to the hotel with you when you go on that business trip, plug it into your TV at your hotel, and watch that Friends episode that you missed because you were on the plane. And even PDAs. You see the smartphone, except for the touch screen, it's got just about everything that Pocket PC does. So all these different consumer electronics capabilities are being rolled into this phone. And it's happening a lot quicker than what even we thought. And we have very good visibility on the whole value chain here. And so it's really important when you're writing your application to target the things that make a phone special. So there's hardware-specific things that the silicon vendor offers or the OEM offers on that phone that you should do. This could be multimedia acceleration, all kinds of different things. The cell network, I think, is the most neglected of the different hardware features that I see with the smartphone applications. Many of the ISVs are just not using the network. And that makes it much harder to sell through to those network operators. And for the end user, I think it doesn't show the benefit of this new platform. So I encourage you to use that cell network as much as possible. There's all kinds of things that nobody's even thought of yet that could be done if more people would use that cell network. Another thing that's becoming really, really important is wireless LAN and Bluetooth, coexistence of the two. I mentioned the scenario of using a VoIP phone using wireless LAN. That's not too far off. So those kinds of things are happening today. Another thing is GPS and assisted GPS. Location-based services, I think, is really going to be huge. The technology is now there to be able to say, hey, I am at this building, which is great if you need to find one of your coworkers around here. Moscone Center is huge. A couple of years from now, you may even be able to know which room they're in. It's going to be pretty interesting what that means for privacy and things like that. But it's also going to be interesting what that means for economics around those features. So the bottom line is, use that network, make sure your application does that, and use the specific features of the hardware that will help you differentiate your application. And so one of the key things that you can do is, as you go through and you look at this kind of layers of the cake that go into building the cell phone, your core platform is whatever the silicon vendor offers. So it's important to understand what are the features within the chips, either the applications processors, the modems, or the integrated devices, if it's something like OMAP, and what's in the reference design boards. That's your starting point to give you an idea of what your palette is to paint with your application. And then I mentioned the cellular network operation, how important this is. When you optimize your application to use that cellular network, you help everybody in the chain make money. And that's what will help make you make money. So one thing is, it's a phone. It's got voice features. Does your application interact or take advantage of any of those voice features? That's a good question to ask yourself. When you're talking to operators about your application, how much data does it shovel back and forth on that network? How often? Those are very important things. And another thing, too, I mentioned that is more of a business model thing, but is also important, is can your application or service be sold as a subscription? Because, again, that ends up being an annuity for that network operator. That ends up being revenue that they can count on over time. So on these emerging technologies, this is really interesting. This is what I call the greenfield of technology, because These things all exist discreetly in the PDA world, PC world, different places. We've started to bring them into the PDA world. But they're all coming to phones. And nobody knows what this is going to mean. There's all kinds of prognostication going on out there as far as what this will mean for all of us. But nobody really knows. So here's some very basic questions that, hey, can you use these different technologies with your applications? Are there areas here where you can differentiate using these features? Because I think this is where real innovation is going to come, where people start figuring out that we can do things that we never could have before unless we had these different things. So, coming on to my conclusions. Now, my conclusions are probably not rocket science, but I think it's important. If you get one thing out of what we've talked about here, it's just to make sure that you look at the whole cell phone value chain and understand how your product appeals to the different players in there. And when you make your pitch, you'll have to change it for whoever your audience is. Maybe slightly, maybe a lot. It depends. One other thing, too, is that independent software vendors are realizing this more and more and more, is that getting on the phone pre-sale is guaranteed revenue. And it's really important because not only are you on the phone and you have guaranteed revenue, but then let's say you're a multimedia player. You're creating a multimedia player. It's less likely that somebody's going to download your competitor's multimedia player and pay for it too. So a good example of a company that's very successful at this was IA Style, who did the applications for the Orange phones. And they were bought by HTC. Their applications were so good. And then differentiating your product. You can't really differentiate unless you take advantage of the palette. The network, the wireless network is very important, as well as the different hardware. And these are things that are always changing. But that's your palette to play with. And if you're not using that, you're going to have trouble differentiating your application because there's going to be a lot of other Me Too products out there. Finally, I do have some resources here for you to go check out. There's some information on the OMAT platform and the developer network. The mobile to market, if you haven't checked that out, you should really do that. That is a nice synergy. I hate that word, but it really is true. It is a nice synergy. Application deployment and business model, and integrating that with how the network operators like to do business. And it's a good, basically, front-end process for you to get your application on there, get it certified, get it approved by a carrier, for them to offer on their websites and their provisioning, and then get paid. So that's really good. Motorola has a really cool site called MotoCoder. Recommend you check that out. And developer.orange.com site's good too. And also AT&T Wireless is, for the network operators, has a really good site. So I'd like to open it up to questions. I know, hopefully I didn't talk too fast here. Sorry? Verizon? Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I'm sure they are. By the way, these are just examples. It wasn't meant to be all-inclusive. Just to give you an idea of what's available out there to use as a resource. But yeah, Verizon's got some things. T-Mobile also that I didn't put on here has a developer portal. Actually, most of them do. Most of the network operators do. Oh, sorry? No, but they have Pocket PC Phone Edition. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, definitely, definitely. That's a good thing and a bad thing. For us, it means that maybe we're a little ahead of the market sometimes. So I think in the specific example is probably maybe Bluetooth. Was that what the example was? Yeah. So, for example, in Bluetooth, the silicon was there, and we provided silicon for that, but the stack and the drivers weren't available within Windows Mobile yet. So, we had to work or Motorola had to work to get that enabled. Another thing that we do is on the different hardware acceleration that we have within OMAP, for example, our current products have a DSP that we can do video and audio acceleration. And what that does is it helps us on the power management side of things as well as raw performance. So we actually do some work to integrate that into Windows, but so that Windows doesn't know that it's not running on the ARM, it's actually running on a DSP. But there is some integration work that we have to do to get around that. Another area is security, where there's customization within software. Wireless LAN has been an area. So actually, that's pretty common. And the reason for it is because, unlike the PC world, where things are pretty stagnant, and then there's a specification change, and then it's stagnant, and there's a specification change, and it's stagnant. Phones aren't like that. Everybody's competing like crazy. It's random electrons, Brownian motion. So it's pure competition. Did I answer the question? No. No, it is transparent to the developer. Yeah, sometimes, well, for Bluetooth, no. For some things, though, the OEM may choose to have their own APIs. One of the things that is common is the network operators may have their own API, for example, for location-based services, because it wasn't in Windows Mobile at the time. Now, at .NET Compact Framework, there are some location-based services APIs. But there will be times when the OEM or the network operator choose to have their own API because it's not in the operating system yet. And the reason is just because things change so quickly and the requirements change so quickly that there's no way that, if you're designing a product today that's going to release 2 years from now, there's no way you're going to hit it 100%. But as far as the silicon vendors, we don't do that. We don't offer, or we don't make the industry go to some TI API. We're all about open standards. Other silicon vendors may have different strategies. Yes, please, in the back.
You mentioned that we get some security requirements mobile operators.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier today you said there's 35 OEM mobile operators supporting smartphones.
Yep. So if everybody heard that, the question is it practical for an independent software vendor to be able to know these, how many, 50 carriers, 35 OEMs? And the answer is it depends, I think. It depends on what you're targeting for your application. If you're doing a general application that's not targeted to a specific device or a specific class of devices, there's no way that you're going to know it. And using something like mobile to market, if it's an aftermarket sale or post-phone sale, that's fine. Where you get into issues, though, is if you want to get on the latest and greatest hardware and you want to work on it on that phone or on that reference design before it's sold to the end user, then you have to pick and choose your battles. And then you have to really know, not only what that OEM is requiring you to do to just be able to do development on that platform, but also what the carrier requires. So it's all about targeting. If you're doing an application that's targeted at a certain market space, you're going to want to target those OEMs who are playing there and target those network operators who are playing there. And you have to research them. It's really crazy right now. We're starting to get some more some standards, not more standards, just standards. But it is tough, and it's. I mean, quite honestly, it's been hell for developers. I'm sure some of you have experienced this, but I think it's going to get better. Yes, please. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the question is, the first part of the question is, how do you get into the decision makers for the different folks in the value chain? And then the second part of the question is, at what level, when do you go to them? When you're just at the idea stage or more of a functioning prototype? Where do you do it? The key in this industry, and I think it's probably a little bit similar to the PC space, because that's where I originally come from, but maybe not as much, because PC space is a lot more defined. But the key in this industry is the networking. It really is. It's coming to events like this. It's going to 3GSM. It's CTIA, getting to know the people within the wireless industry. That's something that's really, really important, just because people work with who they know. And that's my personal opinion. It's not written in stone. Maybe some folks will disagree with me. But that's what I've seen, how business success has come by people getting comfortable knowing each other and then doing business. So, take that from the personal side. As far as when is the best time to do it, that's a tough question to answer. If it's a really cool, crazy, far-out idea that could totally change an industry, it's probably something that you want to talk to people right away. Not give the idea away, though. Make sure you got the NDAs and all that good stuff. But something like that, you'd be able to talk with folks earlier, I think. They'd be more willing to talk with you about. But if it's a capability that either already exists today or an application or feature that a lot of people are working on and is going to be out there on everything in 6 months, you might want to proto it first, because then you're competing to, am I going to get there first before the other guys? And the demonstration of that is prototype. Any other questions? Okay, well, you've got my contact information. Please contact me if you do have any questions in the future. I appreciate you coming. I know it's late, and we've got you out of here a little bit early, so we'll see you over at Peckville Park. Thank you.